I actually first fell in love with theater when my sophomore year English teacher, Ms. Ty, took us to see, I guess I can say because I'm home, Macbeth. And it was like not only the first Shakespeare that I saw, but I've seen little pieces of theater before that. But I mean, something, even though like I was young, I didn't understand the language, but she did the good thing of telling us the story beforehand. So we knew what we were going to see. But I mean, it was just amazing, especially at the end, coming out with some guy's head on a stick, like it doesn't get any better and bloodier than that. And just something about it just really stuck with me. And I've always wanted to write. As for writing theater, that came a little bit later. I loved writing short stories and novels. And even when I was doing that, I would write a little play scene here and there. And I'd get a lot of short stories published. I had one novel published, but it doesn't seem to quite complete me, if you'll excuse the expression. What did is when I started doing theater and I'd hear the audience reaction and how, laughing and gasping and just being there and feeling the energy. And I really felt like that is what my writing was better attributed for. Probably in the late 90s. That's when, as I mentioned, I wrote a novel, Lifestyles of the Damned. I loved it. It was funny. I had it published by a very small publisher. They released it, but they didn't really do anything further to get it out there, to get it into stores, to get signings done. So it was a little disappointing that nothing happened. So I started working on my play Tenants, and I joined a group called First Stage where they would do readings. And that was when I was like, oh, it's great to hear my stuff out loud. And I really, even when I was writing prose, it was very heavy dialogue. So I felt I had the knack of writing dialogue. So not only then to write dialogue, but then to hear it out loud, that's when I was like, I have to do this constantly. I so fell in love. So we do a few stage readings, and those are great. Hear and see the audience. And then just like I would send out short stories, I started sending out short plays to festivals, and I was amazed that I would quickly start getting into these and getting feedbacks and getting reviews that were positive, that even though they were 10-minute festivals, my piece often was highlighted. So yeah, I guess back at the turn of the century, there was just that snowball effect where suddenly I said, okay, I'm going to focus on plays for a little while. And it just overcame. It was just one thing after another and one idea after another. Like I'd finish one full length and maybe it wouldn't go on to be produced, but it would be stage read. And then while I was trying to sell that, I had an idea for another one. So it was just one thing after succession, and it still continues to this day that way. But it's nicer to see that the material that I'm writing now is still getting as positive feedback as the stuff I was writing 20 years ago. I think the theater experience is important for the actors because it's our community. I think whenever we do a show together, it's an instant family, and it's also kind of sad when a show ends because then you lose your family, but then your family comes together. It could be members who you worked with in a previous show, that your old part family, but you're meeting new people. And it really feels like your community comes together. And I'm blessed that, again, from my early days of First Stage, since then I've worked with theaters like the Whitefire. I'm working on a new group with a new group called the Decameron Project. I've worked with EST over here in Atwater Village. And I'm very lucky that I seem to surround myself with people who not only seem to legitimately like my material, but they're also willing to help me mold it into something better. So I work with people who I give great feedback, and together we're working on creating pieces that then we want an audience to come see because we feel we have a message that is important to see. I write a lot of comedy, but even again, especially post COVID, I want to really up the funny, but I think it was just my nature to write funny, but have a message in there as well, which I think is an easier way. A spoonful of sugar, a spoonful of comedy helps an audience digest something, because there's nothing worse, it's not that there's nothing worse, but I think if you go out and you try to hit the audience over the head with a message, they're going to reject it right away. But I think if you're showing in a positive light something that you feel needs to be illuminated and having fun with it, an audience is going to start seeing things from maybe a different point of view, like, oh, okay, I never thought that these people were going through the same thing that I was going through, or that they went through this at all. Is where I think it is important for us to continue to tell stories. And as we talk, like, why theater is more immediate, and that they're there, that they're listening. You don't know with a TV show, are they, or with a book, are they, did they skip the page about the message, or did they fall asleep while, with theater, you feel the odds are a little bit better that they're listening. I wouldn't say that theater is quite my church, because church, to me, being raised Roman Catholic, is there's lots of rules, and you have to do this, and you have to kneel at this time, and you have to stand at this time, and you have to say this. And I, I think that comparison to someone like me is no, because theater is so fluid that somebody could say, hey, this line, could I say this line this way, or could I change this line a little bit? And as long as the same message is there, most playwrights are usually, okay, let's talk about it. And, or can I move this way? I can do that. It just feels like it's so much more a fluidity type of gathering, rather than a very hardcore symbolic. I will say maybe it's my spirituality, because I really feel like when I'm at the theater, either as a participant or just a viewer, that I feel like I'm on a different level. There's, I've seen shows that get me high without having to touch a bit of drugs or alcohol. Things that really, when you see something on stage and you feel like this is my life on stage, you feel it, you feel it here. You see, you can see your soul on stage. And when I'm writing and I see my stuff on stage, that's a religious experience altogether. One of my favorite stories is Actors Workout Studios in North Hollywood did afternoon stage readings of a ton of my short plays. And, I'd arrived to come and see it, and I had to go talk to someone out back. So I walked through the green room where all the actors are sort of, preparing and getting dressed. And it was like walking through my subconscious, because here's all these characters that, because I hadn't been to any of the rehearsals or anything. So it was great to see, like, again, I had to be like, oh, they're playing that person and they're playing that person. So, I mean, that in alone, and it's, again, is like, it just felt like, I was in heaven walking through, memories of my past, of characters that I'd created. My process in creating and writing a play sometimes varies, but not usually. I'll get an idea, and those ideas can come from anywhere. Sometimes it'll come from me reading a book, and it's not like I'm reading a book and, oh, this inspired. Like, it's literally like a line, one thought, one something triggers something in my brain that says, hey, wait, how would this roll if it goes in a other direction? So, like, once that finished product would have nothing to do with the original source material, or, again, like a TV show where there's a little mention of something, or just a situation where I would see someone doing something, like, oh, what if it goes the other, a lot of it's like, that's how it goes, but what if it goes the other way, or something changes? So this idea will come, and if it's one of those are just, it's not going away. Like, I had one the other morning where I'm like, this isn't going away. So I sat down with a notebook, pad and pen, and I sat down and I literally said, I'm just going to write the beginner, and then I'll finish and I wrote an entire 10-minute play by hand. I had to like do hand exercises afterwards. I was cramping so bad, but it was just coming. It was just coming. And then I take that and I translate it into, final draft, type it in. And as I'm telling the story now, I start thinking more like, okay, does it make sense? Does do the characters end up where they're supposed to? But I still kind of call it, the vomiting, just get everything out on page, and then I'll go back. And then it's just the red pen game, where I used to be printed out, but now I actually like to edit on an iPad in Adobe, and I can just mark things up with the big red pen on there. And it's just back and forth. And many times I'll have it read like a workshop that I do with ALAP, and I'll get feedback from them, and then I'll finish it up from there. And then just push it out the door because I could go back and forth 1,000 times. But I'll say sometimes when I'm doing that from hand to pen, something about those, when I get from A through Z there, it almost feels like it doesn't change that much. It's all, yes, like I will spend a week figuring out what this sentence would be to work out well. But as for something, that's when I believe there's a muse, because something just came out of me and it's almost completely formed. It just needs, to be made prettier. I first heard about the Alliance of Los Angeles Playwrights possibly about 15 years ago at the West Hollywood Book Fair, back when they had the West Hollywood Book Fair. And I stumbled upon their booth, and I was unaware that there were such groups for playwrights. I'd been involved with some writing groups, but I'd never quite heard one that was just about playwrights. So I picked up their information, and I said, it was a wonderful idea to be together with other playwrights who are all kind of struggling in the same world, where there really is no, it's not like medical school where you do this, you go to school, you go to medical school, you do your intern and your residency. There's no clear path for playwrights. So it was wonderful to be able to meet playwrights of all different, sizes. And when I went in there, some people thought I was so far ahead of everybody else, and I'm just like, I just feel like I'm going day by day. But it was just wonderful to be able to meet other people, talk about ideas, and talk about how to make the next thing happen, and how to make this happen. And that they also did some, it was, or just to be social, just to hang out with other playwrights who kind of know where you're coming from, and know, oh, I have to do this, but then I have a day job and all this other stuff. So it was just great to meet a whole bunch of people with liked minds, and the cheese and champagne didn't hurt either. I think ALAP offers a lot of very important programs for the theater community. I mean, this being one of them. It's a yearly program where we get to hear new voices telling stories of the community. We also have In Our Own Voices, where our own writers get to read their work out loud, and it's just wonderful. We're starting a new program where we're trying to get some pieces done at local libraries. Unfortunately, the pandemic put a kibosh on a lot of the programs we used to do, and I hope we see them come back. We used to do write outs where we'd go to a cafe and we'd all write together and talk a little bit about our processes. But we have great happy hours where we sit, and we're splitting them. We're back to doing a couple in person. We're doing them virtually, and we'll sit and we'll discuss what's happening at that time. And we have some great panels that help the business end of writing. We have a big fall event that there's some workshopping there as well, but just great panels and a great opportunity to sit and chat with other playwrights. And it's just, I think it's great if you're a playwright or a writer, even actors and directors. We definitely need more of those to help figure out, especially now, how to make theater continue to thrive in Los Angeles. I think the reason to get involved with ALAP, rather you be a playwright or an actor or a director, is because it's just meeting other people. Of course, there's a lot of playwrights that's in our name, but there's people who come in and do from directing and writing. And I think if you really want to take a project or get into and involved in a project that's going to go a little further on down the road, it's important to make connections. And if you're a writer, I mean, you'll learn about where you should be submitting your work, and if you are a self-producer, what you should do. And directors, there's nothing better than me. I love when I go somewhere and I meet a new director, and if we share a vision, then yes, I want to be connected with that person. I want to work with that person. And then actors, if you meet someone who really seems to get the gist of your work, you're going to want to connect with them. But there has to be a place where these people get together, and ALAP is that place. So a couple of my favorite LA programs is, I mentioned the Berkowitz Foundation. That was unfortunately Dan Berkowitz, who was one of the big chairs and founders of ALAP, passed away a couple of years ago, and he used to have the best cocktail parties at his house. And he made those. Even though I drove, I'm like, I'm doing something afterwards because I know I'm going to need some time to walk off those Cosmos. And it was just our mixers. And again, yes, we all like it because there was a lot of cheese. And I mean, I could sit around the cheese table and just stuff my face like Homer Simpson. But what I like those is, and maybe it was the drink, but I know writers don't really need drink to talk about themselves. But you really felt like people were talking, people were engaging, people were excited for each other. And, you could say, oh, I got something, produced, and it's in this small play, and everyone's like, we don't, you're produced, it doesn't matter. And like there were hundreds of other plays and someone chose your play. So it really is, it's always, that's a great place to have the community to understand where you are in writing, and how how what someone may not see as a big accomplishment is a huge accomplishment in this world. And then I'm not plugging this because it's coming up, but the ALAP WeHo Festival has always been one of my favorites because it's just great to have a place to have our stories being told. And it's, now that it's back in person, it's even better because that was fun too. Again, getting a bunch of friends to come to the show, getting a bunch of friends to act in the show. And getting to hear is, as I said, I always write something new for it. So to hear something new that may go on to something else as well is always wonderful. And then afterwards is usually like milk and cookies, and just like, so you don't need the booze to loosen your lips. It's just sitting around with something in your hand, kibitzing with other playwrights. And it's just, just wonderful to be able to chat with others. And again, I cannot express how excited I am that we're doing it again this year live in person. ALAB does so much for playwrights, and we're trying to do more. We have the Berkowitz Fellowship, which takes under BIPOC playwrights, young, usually younger, but that doesn't matter. Early career BIPOC playwrights, and try to get them a little bit more familiar with the theater world and how to put together a show. And then it's great. As I said, we have some programs that allow people to get their work heard. But I always think that, as of all things, we could do more. And what usually stops all communities is that there's not enough money in the till. So definitely, yes. Anytime you want, anytime, ALAP will be happy to receive any donations if you would able to make them. I know laplaywrights.org is our website. There's a big old donation button on there. And we know there's a lot of places that you can give, but I think it's important, especially now more than ever, that we let voices be heard and help us try to amplify them and get them out into the world even more.